Hi, I'm Chris Martin from AgriVista. I head up soil health and we're here today at BALNE, our northern soil health site, just to demonstrate how to do a comprehensive VESS or visual evaluation of soil structure. So I guess the first question is, what materials do I need to actually carry out a comprehensive VESS? Well, the first thing we need is a border spade. And by a border spade, we're looking for a spade that's around about 30 centimetres deep and about 20 centimetres wide. In addition to this, we need a penknife or a trowel so we can actually evaluate or have a look at the actual soil itself and break it apart. We need some form of sheet or tarpaulin to lay our soil on, a tape measure to measure where any areas of compaction, etc. may be, a pen and pad and the AgriVista guidelines which can actually fill in all the data that we need, a camera, and also a location device. And for this particular one, I'm using what 3 words so that in 3 or 4 years' time, I can come back to exactly the same place and make sure we've got a degree of repeatability. So they're the sort of things we need. To actually start the VESS, what we need to do is to actually start to look at the surface area of where we're looking in our representative part of the field and make sure there's nothing untoward there. There's no ponding, there's no slumping, there's no running together of the soil. If we've got a crop growing there, we've got a nice even crop. If anything's untoward, we should write it down on our bit of paper. What we then do is we make an insertion on 3 sides of a hole. So on 1, 2, and 3, leaving the far side completely untouched. And then I will gradually drill this soil backwards. And I can start to see what is then happening with my soil profile. So the first thing I'm starting to look at, and I might want to tap this a couple of times just to see what happens naturally, we'll start to see it starting to come in different layers here. The top is actually very, very tight. And what I'm looking at here is any areas that are likely to restrict the free passage of air and water or root development through our soils. And we can see that top here is very, very tight. We've got a lot of clustered roots. We've also got some evidence of anaerobic activity. So we've got bits of last year's trash that haven't broken down. We've also got very, very few channels running through here from worms, etc. So it's all very, very tight. We can also start to see now it's starting to mottle. It's starting to come a little bit rusty. And that's the iron oxidizing in this soil that's been anaerobic. So you can see here it's a very, very tight, very anaerobic soil. And what we should actually start to do there is prize this apart and see where the horizontal barriers are compared to any vertical fissures. And we can see there's not a lot of vertical fissures in here. There is an odd earthworm. There are a few roots starting to get through. But once we get to 15 centimetres, most roots have about run out of energy. And we get these clusters at that level there where we get the roots not able to penetrate that next level. If we've got time, we can then evaluate this whole side of this hole and then start to decide, have we got an infiltration problem or have we got a drainage problem and what we need to do to address it. Will roots sort this problem out, or will we need some metal to actually get some air back in the soil and help these roots develop? And looking at this, we are definitely going to need some roots, some metal to help the roots. So the next thing we need to do is actually do the VESS assessment itself. And the VESS assessment is a simple score from 1 to 5, with 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. And there's lots of ways to carry this out. The most simple is the method that's been invented by SRUC, which is in this 1 to 5, as you can see from here. And you can download from the website some nice pictorial evidence of how to actually assess which category each group belongs to. The easy way to do this is actually then just to use the one-hand crumbling technique. So for a 1, what would happen is the aggregates would crumble very easily between your fingers into aggregates of less than a centimetre, very rounded, very porous, full of roots, very, very light, very, very easy to crumble together, even into individual PEDs. That would be a 1. A 2 will still break up very easily with one hand, but into slightly bigger aggregates, probably less than 5 centimetres. There'll still be lots of porosity there. There'll still be lots of roots within it. A 3 we class as firm. That can be broken up with one hand, but it takes a bit of force to do so. And probably about 30% of those clods or aggregates, when you break them open, will form angular or subangular rather than rounded aggregates. So we're starting to see a little bit of damage in that soil at that stage. There'll still be roots and there'll still be a degree of porosity, and the size will be less than sort of 7 centimetres of diameter. We then move to a 4, which will be classed as compacted. And a 4 is very difficult to break with one hand. Even with 2 hands, it does take a little bit of breaking up. And what you'll start to see here, most of the aggregates will break up into angular and subangular rather than rounded porosity with a lower porosity. They'll be heavier to hold, and the roots will be around the aggregates rather than through the aggregates. And then finally, a 5 will be classed as very compacted. This will be very, very dense, very, very heavy, very, very angular, very difficult to break up unless it gets wetter with even a lot of force with 2 hands. And when you do break it up, they will be very pointed, very angular, not rounded, very, very few roots. It may even smell, have a little bit of anaerobic conditions about it. Now, one of the most important things when we do this test is to make sure we know the moisture content. The best time to do this is when the soil is friable. But the most important thing is when you repeat it in years to come, you do it at the same moisture content as you do it today. Because as soil gets drier, it gets stronger, which will affect your VESS score. So here at BALNE here, on the untreated here, which has had a lot of compaction and not a lot of crops growing in it for a few years, we can start to see we've got 2 distinct zones when I start to home in here. If I look at my 30 centimetre spit there, the top 15 centimetres is very, very tight, very, very blocky. The roots tend to be clustered into areas in macropores rather than through aggregates, where the bottom is actually underneath that layer of density. It's actually not too bad. It's quite friable, it's breaking up. So I look at my bottom 15 centimetres there, I can see easily with one hand, it's breaking down to fairly small fragments, probably quite a lot are angular. So I would say this is probably just about a 3. So I'll be scoring the bottom 15 centimetre zone as a 3. The top 15 centimetre zone here is incredibly tight, incredibly blocky, very difficult to break with one hand. It's taking 2 hands to really do it. When I do break it up, as you can see, it's very angular. There's not a lot of roundness in there. The clods are heavy, they're not porous. There are a few earthworm holes, there are a few roots getting in there. And probably as we start to get more roots in some of these, it's breaking up a little bit better, but we'll be scoring this at a 4. So putting these 2 zones together, the top zone of 15 centimetres with a VESS score of 4, the bottom zone with a VESS score of 3. So that's given me an overall VESS score with them both being 50% of 3.5. So I'd write that down on our AgriVista template, which we've got here, and it also gives you all the information of how to carry this out step by step, what you need to record. What we would then do is look to count the earthworms within the whole pit. So I'd excavate the whole of this pit, put it on this board and look for the adult earthworms. Those are the ones that have the saddle on them. And there's a really good guide on the HDB website that will actually show you how to actually categorize these worms into different groups and then actually count them so you can come back again in 3 to 5 years time and look at what happened to your worm numbers. So that in a sense is how to do a VESS test. What we would then do within 5 meters of this area is 2 more repeating of what we've already done. So a full VESS test and worm count, and then put an aggregate of the 3 of those tests together, and an average will give you your overall VESS score for this particular region and your overall worm count. What is also worth doing is taking some photographs of some of the key areas as you do so. So any obvious areas of compaction, any obvious areas of slumping or tightness or anaerobic conditions, so that you know in 5 years' time or 3 years' time when you come back to do this again, you can see if you've improved your soil. So that's hopefully giving you an idea of how to do a VESS test. All information, as I said before, is on the AgriVista template and crib sheets. And so, happy sampling.